If you've not seen the part one of the video on Thales, you should really do that because we're just going to jump right in and continue on from there. Thales had those four theses, and the second one is that the earth rests on water. And as best that we can piece together, the idea here is that if the earth rests on water, what Thales is up to, he's offering an hypothesis that would be able to explain phenomena that is experienced. He's also trying to identify the basic substance of nature, of course, and we'll emphasize that right toward the end of this video. And it would make sense, of course, for Miletus to do this, given that for Thales to do this, given that he's living in Miletus, that coastal area, and this theme that the earth rests on water could help explain things. It would help explain earthquakes, for example, if the earth is resting on water, and there's certainly wave possibilities there. And so if there is an earthquake, which of course there were, you could explain it by the waves of the water moving. And overall, this is an attempt to provide a rational and a natural explanation of something that would otherwise be mysterious, right? An earthquake in this case. So we have water as the monism, the basis for everything, right? We suggested in the first video that he is providing a cosmogony, that everything is ultimately water. So of course, the earth rests on water. Now his third thesis might seem to be a little odd. We've seen this trend of philosophers explaining things fairly naturalistically. So to say that all things are full of gods seems somewhat antithetical to that. So we see the tension here of trying to explain everything by natural phenomena, giving an explanation in that way, but also referring to the supernatural. So this is a more mysterious claim, certainly, but it possibly may have meant that since everything changes, there must be a force causing the change, and gods are the kinds of things that cause changes, right? So, for example, the sun, the moon, the sea, the weather, plants, animals, all of these things change over time, and they are like gods, the traditionally conceived gods of his day, since they have an apparently internal force that causes change. So it doesn't seem to be the case that something is causing a change in the sun or the sea. It seems like those things are occurring from within those things themselves, like plants and animals as well. So that may be a basis for why he's making this claim that all things are full of gods. Now, the fourth thesis is that the magnet has a soul. Now, this claim might give us insight into the previous one, this source of change. Again, focusing in on change. How do you explain change? And magnets are special in that they have the ability to cause things to move in a very direct way, similar to animals, right? If you put two magnets together, they seem to have the ability to move one another. And this explanation might imply, it seems to imply at least, that Thales believes that animals have souls. And that is a belief that Aristotle held. Of course, Aristotle has a very particular idea of what a soul is. So I have to study some Aristotle to understand that a little bit more. But to be able to cause motion is a primary feature of what souls can do. And nothing else seems to have this feature, and that may be the reason that Thales concluded that magnets have souls. So this kind of fits with the explanation of the previous theses that all things are full of gods, but this is in particular differentiating some of the things that we observe, the difference between a normal rock, for example, and a magnet, and the difference between, of course, just a mountain and animals and plants that grow and move around on that mountain. So taking a big picture step back, and I'm getting this insight from Mark Cohen, Thales seems to be providing a theory, or at least that's what he's attempting to do. All of these claims are theoretical in some way, and the theory is general, right? When Thales says that all things are full of gods, or that everything is water, that is a very general claim. So it covers a wide range of similar cases. It's not specific to a particular small part of nature. Yes, he talked about the magnet, but that seems to be related to his view, generally speaking, of what's going on in nature. And the theory is consistent with observation. These are characteristics of a good theory, right? It needs to be general, so it applies to a wide variety of cases. It also needs, of course, to be consistent with what we observe, although no specific observations are going to be required to come up with this theory. And of course, the theory does not appeal to authority, not religious authority. It doesn't appeal to folklore, to poets as an explanation, which was typically the case in the time of Thales, right? The poets and religious authorities were the ones who kind of made these kinds of proclamations, and Thales certainly is not doing that. So we are differentiating philosophy from religion in particular. So what Thales is doing is philosophy, not religion. So prior to Thales, most people who attempted to provide general explanations offered primarily religious proclamations. And these came from priests or muses or oracles representing a god or gods. So, for example, thunder would have been attributed to Zeus throwing lightning bolts, right? Storms at sea might have been caused by Poseidon being upset with something, and so on. Now, the difference between those kinds of explanation and Thales' explanation is that Thales is trying to be rational. He's providing an argument, some reasons for thinking that the theory is correct. He's not appealing to religious authority or the poets or folklore. He doesn't appeal to anthropomorphic beings in attempting to explain natural phenomena, which was the general trend of his culture. So this is something new. This is something different to approach the investigation of the natural world in this way. And this is why we call Thales the founder of Western philosophy. To continue this idea a little bit, right, if solar eclipses could be predicted as Thales did, then that means they are natural consequences of natural events, not the result of a temperamental God. And so this means that there's a rational basis for nature. Now, note that Thales goes beyond what is observable. So he's not just doing what we might call science today. Of course, scientists do this as well. But he's trying to explain the observed by providing a theory that's not directly observable. And also note that ancient philosophers and what we might call scientists do not completely reject the role of the supernatural. So it's not just completely thrown out, but they are committed to the idea that even if the universe is under the influence of the supernatural, there is rationality behind the universe. And this is going to be an important trend through the pre-Socratic philosophers that we investigate. Let's consider a criticism to one of the theses coming from Aristotle. Aristotle criticized Thales' idea that the earth floats on water, and I'm just quoting here from De Caelo, as though the same argument did not apply to the water supporting the earth as to the earth itself. In other words, what's the water resting on? This doesn't help explain much, is Aristotle's criticism. Now, other pre-Socratic scholars defend the rationality of Thales, right? They try to defend Thales and what he had to say, but it seems Aristotle might have a legitimate concern. The other pre-Socratics, other scholars of the pre-Socratics might say that, well, look, Thales went as far as he could. And anytime you're providing explanations, especially big picture explanations, they have to stop somewhere. And with Thales, that is with water. I've referred to monism before. Monism is the idea that the things we think are different are really just one underlying thing. And Thales attempts to explain everything in terms of water. That's an example of monism. And so Thales is starting a trend in Western philosophy here. He's reducing complex phenomena to a single, more simple basis. And so monism could take different forms. It doesn't have to be water alone. And in fact, the trend toward monism of some form continued through many of the pre-Socratic philosophers who followed Thales, and in particular, those who followed Thales in Milesia, Anaximander and Anaximenes. They were also monists of some form or another. And then we'll get to what I'll call extreme monism when we see Parmenides and Zeno. So this is a trend that's significant. You have students of Thales. He's a very, very important figure in the history of Western culture in thinking philosophically about things that typically just weren't done previously.